Let's be honest. You ever get frustrated sometimes feeling like, why doesn't it work out for me? Why is it that I've been struggling financially nearly my entire life and this woman can post on social media how it changed her life becoming a content creator and now she's buying her mom $1 million home? Why can these people post on social media how they lost 100 pounds in 15 months and I've literally been trying to lose 20 pounds for about 15 years? Why is it that individuals can post about starting this business and making all these millions of dollars in 2 to 3 years and I've been struggling with my business in 4 to 5 years? It can feel frustrating and it can honestly feel like, what is wrong with me? Well, I want you to understand it might not necessarily be something is wrong with you, but it's actually you're going about it the wrong way. See, Albert Einstein once said, if you judge a fish by its ability to swim, it will think it's stupid its entire life. And I'm not calling you stupid, but you might be that fish. It's not that you are not necessarily trying. It is not that you don't have desires. It is not that you don't actually want to change. It is the way you are going about change that is actually messing you up. See, the problem that too many people have is we try to follow the route of successful people. We try to follow the route of what are considered the big dogs, the people who made it, the people who are successful, the people who came out of the trenches of life or all these other things. And we don't realize that is not you. And you also do not realize that you are underdog. And that is okay. You need to acknowledge the fact that maybe based upon where you come from, maybe based upon your upbringing, your parents, your environment, there are certain disadvantages that you have at life. So you can't approach changing your life. You can't approach changing your identity the same way that a lot of these big dogs do. They've had different advantages. They've had different things in life that's propelled them and helped them get up and higher. And you keep trying to figure out, why can't I change my life? Why can't I change my life? Because you are trying to play the same game that the big dogs have already mastered. And so in this video, I want to help you do that. I want to help you actually create a 30-day strategy to help you change your life, being, acknowledging, and honestly being proud of being an underdog. This is based upon your reality. This is going to be based upon your advantages and also your disadvantages and also your energy. Because let's be honest, some of these 30-day plans look like you can't have a job. Some of these 30-day plans look like you can't have kids, you can't be in school. They literally look like this idealistic, robotic way of waking up and going to sleep and working on the business. And that is not real, and that's honestly not feasible. So in this video, I'm gonna help you do that. Create a 30-day plan to change your life for you. So to start getting the odds in your favor of actually winning, one of the first things I want you to do is you are going to figure out what are some of your advantages. And I actually want you to put this into a 3 kind of fold, because I'm going to teach you how to figure out what are your advantages, what are your disadvantages, and what are something called your desirable disadvantages. And at the end of the day, it's going to make sense. So the first one, what are your advantages? Now, I do understand you are the underdog, but if you are watching this video and you're like, I don't have any advantages, there's nothing about my life that's, an advantage, there's nothing about my life that's desirable, there's nothing about, I want you to understand that is possibly why you are where you are in life. I hate to be that person, but at the end of the day, that is your ego telling you it is so bad what you are going through. It is so disastrous. It is so hard that nobody will ever understand it. Nobody will ever get it. There's no way you can get out of your circumstances. And if your brain is telling you there is no way to get out of your circumstances, then you're never going to go out of your circumstances. Going back to, you're like the fish trying to climb a tree. And so the first thing I want you to figure out when you're thinking about what are some of your advantages, because sometimes we don't necessarily look at them that way, what are some things that make you different? So let's just start talking about you as a person. Your personality. Where do you think you work more efficiently? In isolation or with community, like with others when you are doing things? Do you feel like, okay, if I have to study for something, I'm one of those people that I want to be in the house, no music, nothing going on, by myself? Or am I one of those people where I want to be in a coffee shop? I want to have people around me, just having that feeling. Start figuring out things like that. The next one is, are you more creative or are you more strategic? Are you that person that can think of a business name, that can think of a cute outfit, that can think of all these different things? Sometimes you may struggle with actually executing these things, but they're things you can think of, especially when you think about doing them yourself. This is no shade, but I don't think creativity is you seeing this girl post online that she started this skincare business and then you wanting to start a skincare business. I think the creativity comes about you possibly seeing a problem for something and you possibly coming up with a way to solve that problem. In a sense of, creativity really comes from you. Don't get me wrong, you do get creative ideas from life. Like, nobody thinks of anything completely by themselves, but creativity is like you thinking of an outfit idea, or you thinking of a business name, or you get what I'm saying? Or creative way to do something. When I think of creativity, I just think of doing things a non-traditional way. So most people may think to do something like this, that, and you're like, oh, well, what about this? Or what about that? So that's a little bit more so creativity. Are you more creative or are you more of a strategic person? Are you that person that's like, I want to schedule, this is the time I wake up, this is the time I do this? More of an A-type personality, but in a sense of, you really like strategy. You're not really on the creative side. You really struggle with thinking about things. Are you more of that way? And so those are different ways to think about it as well, thinking about, your advantages. Are you more creative or are you more strategic? Now, another one is, do you have time, energy, drive, or not all three? So do you have time? This is one I think a lot of people need to be honest with themselves about. A lot of people say, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. The person that doesn't have time to do anything is the person that is a full-time student. They're working a full-time job. They have kids and they're also trying to stay afloat. And I'm not trying to make you feel like, I don't want anybody watching this to feel like, oh, well, she's trying to make it seem like I don't go through enough. No, I want you first and foremost to look at the amount of time that you actually spend on your phone. You can go into your settings and look at your screen time. Because I think a lot of people too, we need to acknowledge it's not that you don't have time, it's what you use your time based upon. There are some individuals who literally are working 2 jobs, they're in school, they got kids, they have no time. Right? And so that might be an advantage for you, even though you don't use the time necessarily. Let's say if you work a job, you work 40, 45 hours a week, and then on weekends you're free. You possibly have time. You may not use it, but that might be an advantage to you. You might have time. Another one going into it, do you have energy? What times of the day, looking into, we're thinking about advantages, things that are bumping us up. What time of the day do you actually have energy? Do you have energy more so in the evening? Do you have energy more so in the morning? Or do you just feel like I literally have no energy at all? And the final one is, do you have drive? When it comes to like changing your identity and all these other things, a big thing that people need to understand is you have to have some kind of driving force. What messes up a lot of people is there's this thing of like, I just want to change. I just want to change my life. I just want to change. I just want to do this. And it's like, for what? Like, what is actually your driving force? What is driving you? And so for some people, you may not have a drive. And I don't want you to think I can't change my life because I don't have a drive necessarily, but I want you to understand that's just not an advantage you have. The problem is you will see somebody have a 30-day plan on how to change their life, right? Or how to change your life, and they have a driving root behind it. I'm trying to get out of this situation. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that. And so what do? You try to follow them. You try to follow the bigger dog. Whole time you don't have the same drive as them. You don't have a drive at all. So that's why it's harder for things to stick for you than others, because there's nothing that's keeping you pushing. But all in all, with those advantages, I don't want you to feel bad about yourself. Like I said, you might have some of those, you might not, but just make a list. And like I said, it's going to be a 3-part list. So the first list is, and there's obviously more things you can add. I just wanted to give you examples, but think of things that make you different. Think of things that are advantages for you. And even though you may not use them, like I said, like the time, they are advantages, and you can acknowledge that they do help you. They do help make things a little bit easier for you. Maybe it may even be a stable job. That don't mean you making $1 million a year, but you know how much money you're making every single week. Like, what are some advantages that you have? So in the middle row, I want you to write down, or the second piece, I want you to write down, what are your disadvantages? And I know for some people, especially being an underdog, that list can be so long, right? There's so many disadvantages you have, and those can come in the physical form, such as you saying, there may be something physically going on with you, or you may look at it as far as like where you live, but then also it may be in the mental form as well. Maybe you may say, I'm in survival mode my entire life. I come from parents that were not well off. I grew up in poverty. I want you to make a list as well of what are the disadvantages that you have in life. Now, after you have that list, of course, pause throughout as necessary. I want you to write down the desirable disadvantages that you have. So, which is kind of like, what is the advantage of having those disadvantages? And I know some people are like, that don't make no sense. How can there be an advantage of having a disadvantage? I'm going to give you an example, so hopefully it makes sense a little bit. Let's say somebody is making minimum wage. They're not making that much money. There's so many people who really aren't making that much money, and they're like, I hate my job. I hate my job. Don't want to be here. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it, right? And that's seen as a disadvantage. I don't like my job. Plus, I'm not really making that much money to really live. The reason why that can be a desirable disadvantage is because you don't realize the amount of opportunity that you have. The fact that you're not making that much means you can go from this job to this job to this job. I'm not telling you just to bounce around, but what I'm telling you is you don't necessarily have to work at a job that you hate, because there's so many entry level jobs that you have the right amount of prerequisites for, right? You have the right amount of requirements for, the right amount of experience for, and you actually can do. There are some people who are like, oh my gosh, I love baking. I love baking. I really want to bake, da 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 da. But I work at a warehouse and I hate it. Go look and see if any of your local bakeries need an assistant baker. Go see if they need anybody working in the bake shop. What is the difference? You already make minimum wage working here. They're going to pay you minimum wage working there. You have a higher probability of actually finding a job that you like entry level, because you can literally bounce from here to here to here. And if you're not making that much money, it's going to be the same thing. Contrary to somebody who you may think they have an advantage. Oh, this lady's been working that job, corporate America, climbing the ladder for 15 years, right? She's making six figures. She's making $400,000 a year, and she lives in a nice house, and she has this nice car. From the outside looking in, it seems like an advantage. But like I said, there are advantages to disadvantages, and there's some advantages to some disadvantages. You know what the disadvantage to that advantage, as we may think it is? She hates her job. Right out of high school, right out of college, she got that job because her parents wanted her to get a good job. And she wanted to stop feeling like she was in survival mode her entire life. She hates what she does. She really wants to leave. But the problem is, even if she does save up enough money, she, first and foremost, she has this big house. He had a big house you talked about. Well, she has to pay a mortgage on that house. So she has to make a certain amount of money. That nice car that you talked about, yeah, well, she has to pay that car off. So she has to make a certain amount of money. She can't just switch around and try new things. And hypothetically thinking, even if she does save up enough money, let's say she does it, she saves up enough money for about 6 months to a year to just try out new stuff. You know, the problem is she's overly qualified. That is a real thing. There are some individuals who've been working in corporate America for 15 years and can't get a job as a receptionist. Why is that? Because from a hiring standpoint, right? Why would I hire? I'm a baker. Let's say she wants to even get into baking. I own a bakery, a small little bakery. Would I hire this 24-year-old who has a little bit of work experience, is right out of college, she just wants a job to wet her feet, I'm paying her minimum wage? Or would I rather hire this 34-year-old who is in corporate America for 15 years, all this other stuff? I possibly don't want to hire her. Why? Because, well, her last job paid her $400,000. Listen, she'll be lucky if she get $40,000 working here. She probably is used to things being a certain way. We're kind of a little bit laxy here. We're a small business. There's this thing of literally people having too many qualifications to get a lower paying job because they are overly qualified. And I wanted to give that example because I want you to understand there are some desirable things that people want, advantages to your disadvantages. Even if you grew up in the hood, you grew up in poverty, those are some of the most creative individuals. If you want to talk about fashion, if you want to talk about, listen, do food, like people make, don't get me started. Like growing up, not having money here and there, I've made so many different kind of foods and things, putting them together. Get a list of what are some of the advantages going off of, literally make a list, make a line from those disadvantages. You don't have that much money. You have kids. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying every single thing though. I don't want you to force it to the point where you're like, oh, every single thing, every disadvantage has a, advantage to it. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if none of your disadvantages have an advantage to it, a desirable disadvantage to it, then you're always going to be stuck. Because what are you subconsciously telling yourself? I got to play the big dog game. I have to play like a bigger dog. I want you to understand, as an underdog, you're going to have to work harder. Point blank, period. You didn't grow up with parents with money. You didn't grow up in a stable household. You didn't grow up with somebody that paid off your student loan. You didn't grow up with that. So you're going to have to take the longer route to get there. I want you to understand. Yes. But the problem is, if you don't even think that that route is even there, you don't even think that that route is optionable because you see every disadvantage as just a disadvantage, you're always going to feel stuck. And you're going to wonder why you can't wake up at 5 a.m. and you can't start that business and you can't post that content and you can't do all these things that all these bigger dogs do and all these successful people do to change their life. And it's because you are not seeing what can you do with the disadvantages that you have. What are some options that you can do? What are some things that you can use that people who are bigger dogs, they can't even do that. There's certain things that they just can't do. There's certain people, certain content creators, they can't even be relatable anymore because they've made so much money. They don't even know what's going on with the common folk. They don't even know how to talk. Listen, and you over here embarrassed to show. Listen. And so that's what I want you to do. You create this threefold. You figure out what are your advantages that you have, right? And these are usually you thinking in the big dog form, common things that anybody would say were an advantage. What are some disadvantages that you have? Things that people probably wouldn't want to grow up having these things. And then what have these disadvantages made into desirable advantages? It can be literally from anything. I read this book about a man who had dyslexia, and he said, due to him having dyslexia, he ended up becoming a lawyer. Due to him having dyslexia, it caused him to have a better memory. That better memory allowed him to become a better lawyer because everybody else was looking at the print. He always listened so well. He remembered literally every single thing. He could bring up something from days or weeks ago because he always had to work harder. Why? Because he had that disadvantage. And instead of saying, it's a disadvantage, I have dyslexia, I can never, read like fast as everybody else. He still can't read well, but he's a lawyer, top paying lawyer. Why? Because he realized I'm weak in this area, but I'm strong in this area because I'm weak in this area. Step 2, I want you to understand something called relative deprivation. I want you to understand the lesson here is strategy fails when you are trying to catch up emotionally. First and foremost, I want to talk about emotion because I feel like in the whole self-improvement and self-growth space, there has been this negative connotation with emotion. Lately, there has been this widespread thing of don't care about how you feel. And it feels like a lot of people are drill sergeants, if we're going to be completely honest with ourselves. Like, don't worry about your emotions. And you don't always feel like doing this. You don't feel. And there's been this kind of mindset, subconsciously or consciously to feel like to get rid of emotions. Emotions doesn't matter. Emotions aren't something that are required for self-growth and self-improvement. You just got to do it. And I'm going to come to you guys and say, first and foremost, I apologize because I myself have said things like that before. But after doing my research when it comes to psychology, when it comes to the brain, neuroscience, I've realized emotions actually dictate about 90 to 95% if not, you're going to successfully continue something and honestly even do something. And so I want you to understanding where your emotions are, what kind of emotions you are having are the biggest dictator in giving you honestly a preface to letting you know if you're going to continue to do something or not. And let me give you a little bit of backstory, hopefully, of why this makes sense. This is like you waking up in the morning, right? And you saying, I don't want to go to work out in the morning. Why do you work out? Well, I work out to get my body together. I work out because, I want to be healthier and I want to, you're saying all the things going back to what the big dogs say. Work out to be healthier. Work out to, it helps your mental health. It helps your body to all around have a better body. Cool. So what do? You wake up in the morning, you force yourself to work out even though you really don't want to. Cool. You did it. Congratulations. The problem is that's not your identity. And you know it's not your identity because your identity is shown with your emotions around things. So what happens is you force yourself to work out in the morning, but that mindset that you force yourself to do it with, the mindset of I'm doing this because I'm healthy, it's not shown nowhere else in your life. When it comes to drinking, you drink probably too much. When it comes to processed foods, half the foods you eat, you gotta warm up and they come pre-cooked. You always eating sugar, and so eventually, yes, okay, you might be able to work out for 21 days. You might be able to work out for 30 days, but you may wonder, why doesn't it stick? They told me if I did it for 21 days, they told me if I did it for 30 days, it would stick. Why isn't it sticking for me? It isn't sticking for you because you never truly change your emotions around that entire thing. You change your emotions around that morning. And not even that, you didn't even change your emotions around that morning, if we're being honest. All you did was force yourself until, for example, with me, I've been on this gym journey for about 2 years. I didn't start staying consistent until I noticed I stopped eating processed foods. I stopped drinking as much. Why did I do those things? Not just because it sounded good, not just because the big dogs told me to do it, because I started feeling like these things aren't good for my body. My emotions started to change around this thing. I don't feel good when I drink so often. I don't feel, and not just in the bodily form, emotionally about myself. And that is when I knew I was changing. The reason why I said all this, I know some people may say, okay, you kind of just went on a tangent. The reason why I say all this is because I want you to understand, until your emotions change around you literally changing your identity. I'm just not that kind of person that does this. I'm just not comfortable doing this thing anymore. I'm just not, and you can exercise that in different parts of your life. You're not just trying to practice discipline only when it comes to going to the gym. You're not just trying to practice discipline only when it comes to studying. When you practice discipline in different points in your life, then it's going to be easier to practice discipline when it comes to going to the gym and studying. It's not even saying you're always going to feel like doing it, because I don't always feel like going to the gym, but that feeling of doing something for the betterment of my body, I do it all day. I practice that muscle all day. I practice that muscle when I eat quinoa instead of rice. I practice that muscle when I drink only water all day. I practice that muscle with so many things I do. So when I wake up in the morning and I don't feel like going to the gym, I've been practicing that muscle all day, if that makes any sense, all week, all month. So it's not as hard. So I want you to understand your emotions are so imperative to understand as far as why you are doing something. And that's why I said, bringing it back to, if there's this idea that you're trying to catch up emotionally. I'm trying to catch up to where I feel like I should be. The strategy will never work. And then obviously in the end of the video, I'm going to teach you how to make this strategy, but the strategy will never work. Why? Because you always feel like I said, first and foremost, either you're going to force yourself to catch up in this specific area. So you're going to say, I should look like this. I should be making this money. I should. But what did I say to you before? If it truly becomes your identity, then you're going to have to put that in different points in your life. So because you're going to have to exercise that muscle to make it consistent. So the reason why that's bad is because there's two things that's going to happen. Either one, you're going to force yourself to do something less easy, going to the gym. You're going to force yourself to go to the gym because you're going to say, my body should look like this. It should look like that. It should, right? Or number two, you are going to change your life into this catch up identity. So every area in your life, you're not going to feel enough because you're like, I should be making a certain amount of money, so I got to go hard to make money. I should have a body like this, so you're going to go hard to get this body. There's so many areas in your life where you're literally going to exhaust yourself because you're going to feel like, well, I should. And if you feel like you should be somewhere, that is this catch up mentality. And so I want to break it down a little bit more so you understand it. This comes from this thing, I would say, it's called relative deprivation. So relative deprivation is literally when you just feel behind based upon your environment. And let me give you an example so it makes sense. If someone has relative deprivation when they graduate college versus not having relative deprivation, because like I said, it comes from your environment. So let's say you graduate college with 250 people. A month or two goes by, you bask in the just graduated college, and one day you apply to 6 jobs, next day you apply to 6 jobs. It's been about 2 weeks went by. You applied to 12 jobs, and but let's say a week went by, right? Nobody has said anything to you. Nobody's, responded to you. You're like, oh, okay. Then you hear that out of 250, 50 of your classmates actually got a job. So now you're like, well damn. You start having this feeling of, why I don't got a job yet? You start feeling down. How Keisha got a job? I was in calculus with her and she used to copy off my paper. How Eric get a job? He never even went to class. So what happens the next week? That first week you applied to 12 jobs. The next week you're going to apply to 6. Then you hear 30 more of your classmates got a job. So you're like, oh my gosh, I should have a job. I was good in school, or I graduated. I should. The next week, you're only going to apply to 3 jobs. Why is this? The first week you applied to 12. First 2 days you applied to 12. The second week you applied to 6. The third week you only applied to 3. What is going on? There's this thing called relative deprivation, this catch up mindset that you have of you feeling like, I should be here. I should have a job. The only reason why you feel like you should have a job is because others have a job. Because if it wasn't relative deprivation, let me show you how differently it would look. Let's say you graduated with 250 people. Same exact thing. First 2 days, you applied to 12 jobs. None of your, a week later, none of your classmates got a job. Okay. It's not saying you don't want a job, because you still do want one. But the next week, you're applied to 12 more jobs. None of your coworkers got a job. None of your classmates got a job. Okay. You still want a job. It's not saying you don't want it. Next week, you apply to 12 jobs as well. What is the difference between a person that keeps applying to 12, 12, 12, 12, 12 every week and a person that's applying to 12, 6, 3, 1? It keeps going down. The person doesn't have any relative deprivation. Nobody around them is doing better than them. Nobody around them is making them feel like, relative in their area, I should be somewhere else. Because what are they saying? They're saying to themselves, I do want a job. Of course, I went to school for 4 years. I got my degree, but like the economy is hard. Nobody's getting a job. Nobody. The difference is the should comes on when other individuals around you are doing better than you as you perceive, and you're not doing where they are, or you're not where they are when you feel like you should be. The reason why this is heightened even more, contrary to what it was probably like 20 years ago, is now we have social media. So if you think about it, that girl stopped applying to jobs because half of her classmates out of 250 start getting jobs. Imagine how it feels instead of seeing 200, a couple, let's say 100 people get jobs out of high school, out of college, and you don't have a job. This time you see thousands of people talk about getting their job outside of college and you still don't have a job. Your relative deprivation starts to get worse and worse and worse. Your confidence starts to get worse and worse and worse because you start feeling like, why me? Why is it that I can't get a job? Why is it? And so when it comes to building a strategy for changing your life, building a strategy for changing your identity is based upon a catch up. It's not necessarily always based upon a want anymore. It's not even necessarily that you're like, I want to do this thing, I want to do this thing. There's this thing, if I got to catch up, I got to get to where they are, I got to get to, and you don't realize that feeling of catching up is actually what's keeping you back, and it's actually what's kept you back. Because I want you to understand, where you are in life is not based upon how good you are, it's based upon how good you feel you are. I want you to understand that. It's kind of like the quote when they say you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. That's very similar to that girl that stopped applying to colleges because she started feeling like she was less than, because everybody else around her started doing better than her as her perception, because they started getting jobs. An example I have of this is a Harvard trained psychiatrist. He was saying how he applied to, before becoming Harvard trained, 100 medical schools before he finally got in. I want you to understand that. 100 medical schools before he finally got into one. Once he went to medical school, he graduated with a 2.5 GPA. If I'm not mistaken, a 2.5 is like a C, around that range. He ends up, after graduating medical school, I believe somewhere in Texas, getting a 2.5 GPA, he applies at Harvard to be a research assistant. Now, if you're anything familiar with the medical world, becoming a research assistant or like that whole science field, like that's like incremental to boosting your career and getting to the next step. He ends up applying to multiple research assistant jobs. He ends up getting one at Harvard University. Harvard. This is one of the most illustrious schools when we're talking about medical, when we're talking about science. With a 2.5 GPA, how is that possible? The same kid that applied to over 100 medical schools, how is that possible? Turns out he was the only one that applied. This goes back to what I said. Where you are in life is not based upon how good you are, it's based upon how good you feel you are. See, the difference between him and a lot of people, I'm sure there were so many people who had a 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5. But what did they deal with? They dealt with relative deprivation. They told themselves, that's Harvard. Like, in order to, become a research assistant at Harvard, you probably have to have all this experience. You probably had to have at least a 4.0. You had to I only have 3 years of experience. I only have a 3.4. I only was, the valedictorian of, my university. I didn't even, or salutatorian. I wasn't even a valedictorian. There's this mindset behind it of relative deprivation, because let's say it was a community college. They would have applied to that community with a 3.4 GPA, graduating from, a nice school for somewhere in neuroscience or psychology, whatever, becoming a salutatorian. You would have easily applied to a school that was a community college and be like, yeah, I could become a research assistant there. Duh. What is the difference? Because you have relative deprivation. Based upon the environment, what you're telling yourself, I feel like I'm better than everybody there, or I feel like I'm at the same level, if not higher than everybody there, so I can be there. When it comes to Harvard, what are you thinking about? These are people who were the valedictorians of America. These are the people who come from the best high schools in America, if not sometimes the world. These are the smartest people. You start feeling like you are not enough. And it's not even based upon how good you are, going back to him. It's going back to how good you feel you are. So he simply applied. And I want you to understand, this is so imperative that you do understand, because this is something that you can't necessarily shake. Now, don't get me wrong. He was able to do it, but he also did it because he had this confidence of, first and foremost, he applied to over 100 applied to medical school over 100 times. But also something that's a little bit different about him is he didn't even go to applying to medical schools until he was in his late 20s. Going back to what I said about that list, right? We're going to bring it back a little bit. Most people would have saw that as a disadvantage. Why? Because they would have said, I'm in my late 20s and I'm trying to go to school and all these kids are going to be younger than me. That's a disadvantage. That's a desirable disadvantage. Why? Because you've experienced life. Why? Because at 20 something years old, you're a lot more diligent about your grades, about class than an 18-year-old. I'll never forget my freshman year or my sophomore year of college. I was about 19 years old. I was paired up in a group with a man that was 24 years old. I'll never forget, he said, I don't know how y'all do it. He said, if I was 18, 19 years old in school, I would never go to class. I would get bad grades. He went to school for hospitality management. He was on a dean's list. I'll never forget, every single semester. Why? Because he used his disadvantage to a desirable advantage. He's experienced life. He knows what he wants to do. He's not worried about going out to parties and having fun like so many of us were that weren't doing what we were supposed to do. Why? Like I said, because he didn't have relative deprivation. But why did he not have relative deprivation? Because he was around all these college students. Why? Because he did something, which I'm going to explain to you, is he made himself a big fish in a little pond. But what does that mean, being a big fish in a little pond? Or what does it mean to be a little fish in a big pond? Being a big fish in a little pond, if you think about it, you have full control over the pond. You have more ability in the pond. Why? Because you are a big fish. This is a little pond. This is can't nobody else fit in here. This is for you. On the contrary, if you think about a little fish in a big pond, there's probably a lot other fish. There's probably a lot other things going on. There's probably a lot less things in that fish control because they are a little fish in a big pond. And being an underdog, one of the things that is most valuable to you is figuring out where can you be a big fish in a little pond. Your entire life, you've possibly felt like you were a little fish in a big pond. You felt like people had more than you. You felt like people had more advantages than you. You kind of felt like you dealt with relative deprivation. There always was this mindset of you not feeling enough and not having confidence and not feeling worthy enough. Well, one of the ways to combat that is to finally make yourself a big fish in a little pond. Put you in a position where you probably have more experience, where you probably have a better understanding, a better capability to actually achieve and win something. The problem is, if you've been an underdog your entire life, for forever you've wanted to feel like a big dog. You wanted to be with the big dogs, but you don't realize being with the big dogs is possibly what has been holding you back for so long, wanting to be with them, wanting to abide by their rules, wanting to play their games. They have different advantages to you. You keep trying to play a game that they already mastered. You keep trying to say, okay, well, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to get this degree and I'm going to do this and I'm going to have all these internships and da-da-da-da-da. That girl that you comparing yourself to, yeah, the girl that had the 2 to 3 internships. Yeah, the girl who was able to, go to college, this big university. The girl that was able to get a college, job right after. You know that girl parents paid for her apartment the entire time. You know that girl didn't have to work a job. You know that girl parents literally paid for her entire college tuition by her freshman year. So you over here trying to be a little fish in a big pond. You over here stressing because you feel like you got no time because you got to make sure you got food on the table. You got to make sure your bills are paid. You feel like you're literally drained. You owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans. Why? Because you wanted to be a big fish. You wanted to be a little fish in a big pond when you didn't realize your advantage be being a big fish in a little pond. So instead of saying, hey, I'm going to go to this big illustrious 4-year university, maybe you're going to say, okay, well, for the first 2 years, I'm going to go to a community college. I'm going to really try to get scholarships. I'm really going to try to get on a dean's list every semester. And then for the next 2 years, I can go to this big university. In a sense of, you realize I need to do things differently. I can't keep abiding by the same rules of, i.e., the bigger dogs. And so one of the things I want you to realize, where in your life can you be the big dog in a small pond? Now, another great example I have of being a big fish in a little pond is Issa Rae. If you're familiar with Issa Rae, she's the creator of the show Insecure, and she's also the main character of the show. She's a TV producer, movie producer. She's done a lot of things in the entertainment industry. Issa Rae graduated initially from Stanford University in California. If you're familiar with Stanford, you would know Stanford is a school known for producing high quality engineers, doctors, that whole medicine type area. Why would she do that? Why would she? Because it was a choice. She could have went to an NYU. She could have went to a Juilliard. These schools were well-known actors and producers and TV directors have graduated from. Why did she choose willingly to go to Stanford? Because she wanted to be a big fish in a little pond. She knew not that many people are not going to Stanford to try to become producers. People are not going to Stanford to try to become the head of the drama club. So what did that give her? The ability to become the best at it there. She literally said it in an interview. She was like, going to Stanford, I didn't have to worry about cameras not being available. Going to Stanford, you don't have to worry about essentially this thing of this immense competition and being perfect. Because if you go to an NYU, you go to a Juilliard, everybody there is trying to be an actor. Everybody there is specifically trying to be in the entertainment industry. So that means everybody there, to get a play at the school, or your play has to be top-notch perfect, because there's people who probably been trying to produce plays since they were 13 years old for when they went to Juilliard. Oh, you want to rent out a camera? Oh, you got to make sure you rent out that camera that you want to shoot with. Maybe like 2 to 3 months ahead, because everybody's trying to rent out a camera. Oh, you want time to talk to your professor so they can help you go step by step through your script. Well, I hope you know there's 400 other students who want that same thing from that same professor. There's this thing of it being so much more competition, it being so much harder. You feeling like you have to be so much more perfect. Your play has to be perfect. Your short film has to be perfect. Everything you do has to be perfect. Why? Because you are a small fish in a big pond. And I want you to understand, especially if you've been an underdog your entire life, especially if you're one of those people that felt like I've always had to work hard, I always felt like, I had the short end of the stick. For the first time in your life, give yourself the ability to feel like you confidently have done something. Give yourself the ability to feel a little safe. Give yourself the ability to not feel like every day and night you have to work hard to the bone. I think some people don't even understand. I've been talking about this in so many videos of growing up and embodying survival mode. Allow yourself to be the best. There's this thing of everybody feeling like, well, I don't want to be the best in the room, and I want everybody around me to lift me up, and I only want to be around people that's better than me. There's a time and a place for that. But if you are the underdog, right now what you need to do is make yourself the big fish in a little pond. Because what did she do eventually? What she did eventually is she ended up going to school after she graduated from Stanford. And then with her experience, and then with the exposure she had, and then with all the skills she was able to build, then she went to New York and she went to school, and she was able to go to a film school. But she didn't go into that film school being the small little fish she would have been if she would have first went to a New York school. She was a little bit of a bigger fish. And there's this thing that I want you to understand of, going back to your advantages and your disadvantages. Where in life, think about it, with the things that you want to do, where in life, and usually these are things that we don't do because we think we're too grown for these things, we're too old for these things. But you don't realize that's what makes you the perfect candidate, because that will make you a big fish in a little pond. So now let's talk about how we are going to build your strategy in the next 30 days. So the first thing I want you to figure out is, what are 1 to 2 goals that you want to execute and or achieve? Now, going back off of it, I don't want you to feel like things that you feel like you should be doing right now. I should be here right now. I should be making this amount of money. No, what are things that you genuinely just want to do? It doesn't matter if it's going to take you 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or 5, 10, 20 months. This is something that you genuinely just want to do. And so I want you to think about it. Is it going from discipline? Is it something in your health? Is it something in your income? What is something that you just genuinely want to do? It doesn't matter, like I said, how long it takes, but you're just like, in my lifetime, this is something that I want to do. The second one, I want you to identify what do you bring to the table. And this is why I wanted you to make that 3-part list, because this gets you very specific on what are the advantages and the disadvantages that you have in life, i.e. what are the things that you would be good at doing and what are the things that you are not going to be good at doing. One of the things that messes us up so often, especially coming from the American school systems, just sometimes our parents, there's this thing since we were young of you have A, C, D, and your parents are like, bring that D up, and you need to bring that D up. And they're so hard on you on that D, nobody pays attention to that A. So much so that nobody even pays attention to when that A goes down to a B because you work so hard to bring up that D. And I'm not saying that you should have Ds, but what I'm saying is in life, there are things that we are good at. There are advantages that we have, but for so long we were taught that we have to be perfect and we have to have everything in line. And so the reason why I wanted you to create that list is essentially helping you to figure out where are your A's. There are some areas where you have D's. There are some areas where you don't do that good. Instead of focusing on those areas, let's look at where the A's are. Let's figure out what are some of the desirable disadvantages that we have, and let's figure out where are we going to be putting our time and our energy so we can actually complete our goals. So that's number 2. Figure out what makes you essentially different, or what do you bring to the table when it comes to completing these goals that probably isn't traditionally what people would assume and or use. The next one, number 3, I want you to align your actions to your identity. Like I said before, you can force yourself to wake up in the morning. You can force yourself to go to the gym. You can force yourself to you can force yourself in a relationship. There's so many things you can force yourself to do at that moment, but we are trying to create an identity. So you need to figure out what are some action steps that are going to align with the identity that shows you, hey, I'm not just caring about my body when it comes to going to the gym in the morning. I care about my body all day. Hey, I'm not just caring about starting this business to make more money. I'm actually a very structured person. I'm actually a person that cares about my finances. You need to figure out what are action steps and make a list of those that are going to align with their identity. Because I promise you, you can have the best business plan in the world, but if you have no structure inside of your life, if you do not know how to manage money inside of your life, you're not going to have structure in your business, and you're not going to know how to manage the money when it comes into a business. So you need to figure out, how can I make this into identity? How can I make this, going back to what I said, where this is a muscle that you exercise throughout your day, throughout your life. So when you do have to exercise it to, i.e. achieve your goals, it's just a part of the exercise. Now, the next one I want you to do is track your emotional energy around your actions, because going back to what I said before, you can force yourself to do something. You know your identity has truly changed when your emotion around that thing has changed. So before you do something and possibly after you do something, this is going back to the action steps that you have aligned from the last step. Have a notes app in your phone. There shouldn't be too many things. Like, don't make it to be like 7, 8 things you gotta do a day. 2, 3, 4, I don't know. Figure out what works for you. Those things that you have to do, and you can record, which it depends, to each its own. For me, sometimes it's like a before thing because I get anxiety before I have to do some of the things that I know I'm supposed to do, even though it could be something small. It could be like, oh, I gotta call my grandma, or I have to fill out this paperwork. I don't know why. I just get anxiety like before doing the thing. So sometimes you could document the emotions that you have before, or for some people after. I just know for me, usually after I do something, I'm like, oh, I feel good about it and I feel great. It's like leaving the gym. You don't want to go to the gym, but then after you leave the gym, you feel great about it. So sometimes the after emotion is a good feeling, it's a happy feeling. It's the before emotion, i.e. the emotion that is required to make you actually do that thing that you are currently struggling with. So I want you to have a way to account for that. And the final one, I need you to protect your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. You are the underdog. We've already stated that. We've already said that. To understand you are the underdog means your attention is so much more valuable. There are individuals who have life set up for them. They can lily lag. They can do things. They can go off course. They can be lazy. They can do, and I know it's unfortunate, and I know it's messed up, and I know it's not fair, but I want you to understand, you need to be so hard on yourself on making sure that you are not giving your attention to people who don't deserve it, to things that you don't deserve it. that phone, that man. There's certain things in your life that you know you probably shouldn't do, in places you know you probably shouldn't be, people you know you probably shouldn't be with. But I want you to understand your attention, where you give your attention to, is so much more valuable, because you're gonna have to work so much more harder to get where you need to be. There are people who have fallback plans. If things don't work out for them, then they got mommy, they got daddy, they got this person to help them. There are people who, if they mess up in one area, they can go back to another. And one of the worst things that I did for myself, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, is I start getting relative deprivation because I started comparing my attention to people who had different kinds of advantages that I didn't have. You know, I grew up with certain friends and they had certain things that I didn't have, but I wanted to be a part of them. I wanted to be a bigger dog. I wanted to. And so I made myself a part of certain things that I honestly should not have. And it's not on a bad type timing. It's just on a timing where it's like, I should have been a little bit more diligent. I should have been a little bit more, because I was a underdog. So I want you to be so aware of your energy, because it's so much more important. Well, thank you guys so much for watching my video. Of course, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And thank y'all so much, and have a great one. And I want you to understand, to change your life, you do not have to be perfect. Being an underdog is fine. You just have to acknowledge it and build a strategy that's based around you. So thank y'all. Don't forget to go to the show notes below. Sign up for my newsletter, for my Pinterest, my TikTok, and anything else. Also, if you like the audio version, to listen to my podcast. Thank y'all. Have a great one.